J'aimerais appeler sur scène Liana Saleh.
I would like to now call on stage Liana Saleh and Nicolas Vadimov, who are the filmmakers for this film. Thank you. Thank you very much for this film, and thank you for entrusting FIFDH with the first public viewing of this film, which will then be seen on RTS. We'll have just a few minutes in order to discuss with you before we make room for the upcoming panel. Just a question to start with. Why is this film taking place at this historical moment for the region, and why did you choose to have a historical approach to UNRWA and the history of this organization? Laura, may I just express a few words of gratitude? First, we couldn't do it before the film, but I'd like to thank Katia Stoker, the executive producer of the film. I'd like her to come on stage. Katia, where are you? Because we did prepare a little something, since it is the
J'en profite pour remercier Irène Chaland, la productrice du film.
It is the first screening of the film. And Katia Stoker, who is here, who is the executive producer of the film, and she will be able to do the necessary thanks. Thank you, Katia. She's prepared something. I haven't prepared anything, actually. It is true. I wanted to very much thank FIFDH for hosting us, and RTS as well, for allowing us to have a full room for the opening night of the film. And thank you to all the partners, and thank you for RTS, who's allowed us to produce this film, as well as the UFC, the Federal Office for Culture, who's allowed us to produce this film and to support us with the Ciné Forum. Thanks also to DPF, the Fund for Television Producer. Thank you to the entire technical team who's participated in the production and the realization of this film, with a special mention for all the research and all the archive work that was done. It was a lot of work. Thanks also to all the team who worked on post-production. Thanks to everyone. And now we can start the discussion, but there are many people we'd like to thank. But I wanted to dearly thank a person who is currently in Gaza, Ameni Sardout, who is in charge of UNRWA's archives, and who has truly kept a professional communication throughout and given us all the archive material that we needed while she was experiencing the bombings. So thanks to her and the entire team of the film. We cannot mention all of them tonight. Most of them are here in the film, but just to say that it was a very long and tedious work, and particularly the team who supported me every day for 4 months. And it was just a lot of work that created a great tension amongst us. So many people are part of creating this film, and we thank each of them, and we applaud each of them. Can we perhaps start from the archives? Because we can see there is lots of work that was done in terms of archives, and we can see that you worked with UNRWA archives, which takes me back to the question about the historical approach, by why you decided to start from the starting point, from the inception of this organization, in order to speak of how important it is today. Thank you very much. First of all, because for almost a year now, we've been hearing the word UNRWA almost every day on in television programs, and sometimes we understand it, sometimes we do not. There is a polarization that has started since October 7th, and with terrible accusations being expressed against UNRWA, where the entire UNRWA organization has been categorized as terrorist. And we felt the need to build a narrative that would allow us to understand the historical context of far from the polarization. We wanted to have a certain professionalism as filmmakers, as journalists. It is our work. We felt the responsibility to clarify the context, to provide people with a tool for them to be able to understand what UNRWA is today, and also to understand how it was and how it is linked to the Palestinian cause, to the hope of Palestinians since Nakba, but also to the international community and the responsibility of the international community in this context. All of these reasons have led us to work on this film. And then, of course, Nicolas will speak of it in greater details because his work on UNRWA started long before this film. Well, there isn't much I have to add about this. But the time I was able to spend, notably with the UNRWA teams, because this is what the temps présent that we were producing, that Frédéric Pfyffer was speaking of earlier, it wasn't such a long shooting. We shot for about a month. We thought that the people with whom I'd been able to spend that time, the people I was able to work with, that were trying to do their work in the best possible way, but with a commitment and a precision and extreme clarity, and it was fascinated by the fact that it could also be accused of being linked to terrorism or to themselves be terrorists. There are no words to describe this narrative. And so starting from there, we felt that reestablishing a certain truth was worth a film. It's actually worth a lot more than a film. But the idea with this film, the idea is to be able to give you the possibility. I hope that the film will circulate. I hope that it will be seen greatly on Sunday on RTS, but way beyond that as well, for people to be able to understand how the mandate given to UNRWA is very difficult. It's almost impossible. This is what we're trying to see in the film. There is an original sin. Both are saying the people who is carrying the voice of the Israeli government is speaking of an original sin, and another speaker, Stéphanie Labtala, who carries more of a Palestinian side, is also speaking of an original sin. So when one is that ill birthed, it is then very hard to live. A child could use this metaphor. It is a child that is trying as best it can to develop itself with two fairies who have a different opinion and a third fairy who wasn't there on the day of the baptism, perhaps the international community, and who has to carry on their shoulders a number of missions which are complex and sometimes opposed, depending on who describes it. UNRWA this film could also have been titled Mission Impossible. There are many other titles that could have been adapted. UNRWA Mission Impossible is definitely one of them, but I feel that they're doing quite well. So, yes, you've said that the positions are quite polarized. Was this a difficulty throughout production to also have the Israeli position presented in the film in order to have a balance or to at least avoid some specific criticisms of the film? As I said, we wanted to understand, we wanted to present the historical context, we wanted to do so as rigorously as possible. We also felt the need to listen to the official discourse, including the Israeli discourse, and this is what Ilat Nif represents today, the official Israeli discourse. But in the film, we have built it, we have included it, not just to have opposed views, but in order to take the time to construct both narratives, far from cliches and far from the roots of the cliches, but also to give the public tools in order to draw their own conclusions about a conflict which is been over-mediatized for years and yet always ill understood as well. So what do you hope that this film will contribute to doing? How will it influence the public, do you think? I will try to answer this question by picking up on the previous one, the idea of including the voice of someone from the current Israeli government. It was not easy for us at the beginning because it wasn't something which we had necessarily imagined. We had a number of discussions with RTS, but in the end, we feel it's very positive to have integrated it because it allowed us to do work on ourselves, something that was a bit deeper than what we were planning to do. And I think the voice of this woman representing the Israeli government allows the public to understand, to truly understand what issues are at stake for people who criticize UNRWA and what truly feeds them, because UNRWA, people who criticize UNRWA have not really said this. They say it amongst themselves. This is something that is heard in Israel, but for international community, the discourse is that some people from UNRWA have participated in October 70. UNRWA is linked to Hamas. UNRWA didn't see the tunnels being constructed under the hospitals, but no one before had ever said that the true reason for wanting the UNRWA to disappear was the will to have the whole Palestinian people disappear, and the will to dismantle UNRWA participates in the will to dismantle the Palestinian people. And she clearly explained this. I interviewed her in Tel Aviv. It was very hard, but it was also extremely interesting. I do not regret doing it because finally these words, this narrative was emerging, and I felt that if we had had more time, more facts would have come out. It is as if we'd been pulling on a thread and to unwind a whole reality. And to pick up your question, what will this film be able to do? Well, I hope it will open people's eyes as to the issues that support criticisms of UNRWA. It's not about what they did well, what they didn't do well, what is in school books or other. It is a much more global issue that is at play here, and that is about the survival of the Palestinian people. I'd like to add a couple of words, please.
Oui, en fait, c'est le peuple palestinien.
Yes, it is indeed the Palestinian people that we are speaking of during the film and UNRWA, but I think the issues at stake are a lot wider. It is the UN, international law, international humanitarian law, and the Palestinian people represent the world in which we live today. If we see massacres and continuing occupation in Palestine, if we're seeing projects of expulsion of the Palestinian people, which are openly being spoken of by the Trump administration, it is a crime that we, as citizens of the world who believe in human rights, we must express our indignation in this regard, and we must oppose this. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. This conversation will now continue with the upcoming panel, and I would like to invite Anne-Frédérique Widmann. Please come on stage and present this evening's panelists. Have a great evening and a great debate. Thank you.
Quelle stupéfiante soirée.
Good evening. What an impressive evening. If UNRWA were to disappear because of the enduring attacks, what would be the consequences? If international humanitarian law, human rights were to dwindle and disappear, what would be the consequences for the Palestinian population and ourselves? We would never have wondered about these questions even recently, but these are the issues we'll be discussing this evening. My name is Anne-Frédérique Widmann. I'm a journalist at RTS, and the people who will be joining me here on stage are not observers, they're actors. They are people who are or have been on the front line. First of all, live from Ramallah, I don't know whether she's here or not. Yes, she is. Please give a big hand.
Hanan, good
To Hanan Ashrawi.
So nice that you're with us tonight. Donc, Hanan Ashrawi, leader politique.
Hanan Ashrawi is a political leader She was party to peace negotiations ever since 1991. She was a member of the executive committee of the PLO, and then she stepped down in 2020, and she is an important figure of Palestinian civil society. She founded a series of organizations whose goal is to defend human rights as well as democracy and dialogue. She was acknowledged for this everywhere in the world.
To speak up. How are you?
Hello. Yeah, I'm fine. I just stopped hearing the interpretation.
Oh, perhaps I should speak French then?
But I can hear you now in English.
Okay.
No, I can hear you, but there's a bit of an echo. It's
Okay, good.
Thank you.
So you're in Ramallah, the heart of the West Bank.
Yes, I am.
The West Bank being under attack now for more than 3 weeks. What is the general feeling? What do you feel around you? Do you feel anger, sadness, injustice? What do you feel?
Well, frankly, I think I feel individual and collective trauma of all the Palestinian people. We are angry, yes. We are sad, yes. We are horrified. Most of us cannot believe that what is happening is actually taking place in plain sight. The whole world is watching, and yet there is lack of will to intervene, to engage, to hold Israel accountable, to stop this horrific. It's not just a massacre, it's a genocide. People argue more about the words than about the fact itself, that a whole people are being besieged, are being bombed, are being killed, are being massacred, families are being eradicated, all the universities were destroyed, hospitals, and so on. And people are debating, not just how many angels can dance on the head of a pin, are debating linguistics and terminology, seeing the total implementation of the most fundamentalist, extremist Zionist ideology taking place. So they're seeing the Nakba enacting itself with the full erasure of the Palestinian people, our history, our narrative, our culture, our rights, and with the total either inability or lack of capacity of the international community to intervene or engage or protect the Palestinians or hold Israel to account, and of course with the collusion of the most of the Western governments. So this has exposed lots of fault lines in the world. It has exposed a great rift between North and South, where South Africa can present a case to the ICC, and we see all the most Western Northern countries, particularly white countries, are busy not just defending Israel and giving it cover, but providing it with the weapons and means of assault that it is using against the Palestinians, and preventing any kind of implementation of even the resolutions or decisions of the courts, of the judiciary. And we are seeing a rift between East and West again, and we are seeing a rift, again, another fault line that has exposed the inability of the multilateral system, not just to protect people, but also to safeguard its own institutions, its own work. It has to be the will, a global will of people in order to ensure a global rule of law, and yet we are seeing it incapable of intervening, as I said, of engaging, of protecting the victims, and not just of holding the oppressor and the criminal accountable, but also to stop what is happening, to stop the war crimes, to stop and to respect international humanitarian law, human rights, and resolutions of the international judiciary and so on.
Dr. Ashrawi, please allow me to... Please allow me, we will be talking more about that, but please allow me to introduce the other participant to the panel. May I? Donc, deuxième participant important.
Second major participant, Mr. Jean-Daniel Ruch. Jean-Daniel Ruch is an expert in international justice. He was a political advisor to Carla Del Ponte, the prosecutor, when she was prosecuting former war criminals in the ex-Yugoslavia. He worked for decades for the Federal Department of Foreign Affairs as a special envoy to the Middle East and many countries, including Israel, where he was in contact with all the parties, including Hamas. He worked with several federal councillors here in Switzerland, sometimes from opposing parties. I'll mention Micheline Calmire, who's with us this evening, who worked on a two-state solution, and Ignacio Cassis, the current Minister of Foreign Affairs, first federal councillor, who mentioned the assumption that UNRWA was part of the problem and not part of the solution. Thank you very much for being here. Do you want to react to the film or to something that's been said? Well, thank you for your interest. Thank you very much. I feel lots of support for UNRWA in the room, which is very important because there are major deadlines coming up very shortly. And finally, of course, our last panelist tonight, Philippe Lazzarini, Commissioner General of UNRWA ever since 2020. Mr. Lazzarini is there to defend UNRWA against these unprecedented attacks. He's had a long career for the UN, the ICRC. He worked in a very impressive list of a number of countries, including many in the Middle East. Now, UNRWA has been under attack. You are also under attack. In the field, the situation is becoming more challenging day after day. What is your strategy? What is the light at the end of the tunnel that makes you endure all of this? Thank you very much. First of all, I'd like to congratulate Nicolas and Liana for this fantastic documentary film, which explains what's at stake with this UN agency. It's true that we've been hearing about UNRWA on a daily basis in the media without really knowing what UNRWA is about. Before October 7th, no one knew what UNRWA was. Ever since October 7th, it's been in the limelight, but it's very important to remind people that we work in a very emotional, very challenging political context that is very polarized, and it's been shown in the movie perfectly well. There are two completely different narratives at play, and UNRWA is in the middle. Now, what does the future hold in store for us? Well, first, I think that attacks against UNRWA are mainly political attacks, and this is what we try to demonstrate each and every time. And this is exactly what the documentary film does. We see the official version of the Israeli government that says that UNRWA must disappear because the issue of the Palestinian refugee statute must disappear. And the people who were behind the laws at the Knesset said very clearly that it was a one-in-a-generation opportunity to do away with UNRWA, and the time had come to do so. So all these accusations, we're infiltrated, we're complicit, we sympathize with this terrorist movement, are just excuses to discredit UNRWA vis-à-vis the international community. Now, how do I manage on a daily basis? Well, these are not personal attacks. These are attacks against my role as Commissioner General in charge of this agency that I'm being attacked. If someone else comes after me, this person will be attacked in the exact same way. And what guides us? Well, in this role, we're given a voice, which is not the case of Palestinian refugees. The international media don't have access to Gaza. So it's a voice that we have to use and that I have used ever since the first day, ever since the beginning. I realized that we're very far from peace between Israel and Palestine. But what happened in the area was a cataclysm. We were all surprised by it. And maybe there will come a realization that this containment policy that has lasted for the past 75 years can no longer endure. What will follow, we don't know. But as long as the glass is 1-2% full, I think it's still worth continuing. Now, there are the needs on the ground in Gaza with international assistance put on hold, the electricity that's been cut off. What are the needs on the ground? Well, personally, I've been banned from Gaza for the past year or so. I've been banned from the occupied territory and Jerusalem for the past 8 months now. So what I am going to say comes from my colleagues, but these are things that you saw in the documentary film. The situation is apocalyptic for the time being. Gaza is rubble. People's daily concern is finding food, finding comfort one way or another. Thank goodness there's a ceasefire ever since early February, which means that people no longer have to worry about bombings. But blockade has been reinstated about 10 days ago, as you said. It's just the instrumentalization of humanitarian assistance to political ends on the part of Israel. And the situation can only deteriorate from then. Let me put it this way. In the course of the past 2 months, we managed to increase humanitarian assistance quite significantly. We multiplied it by 10 collectively. We managed to turn around the risk of severe acute malnutrition and famine alerts. Now, with the blockade, given that there's no food coming into Gaza through humanitarian assistance, we'll be facing this risk again. The issue is when, and we'll be able to figure out in the coming weeks. The good thing is that the ceasefire still holds. We're talking about a potential extension of phase 1 and potential talks for phase 2, but no one knows whether it'll continue lasting, whether Gaza will be again at war, or whether there'll be anything else. Now, what about UNRWA's means? Laws have been enacted by the Knesset. We may debate whether they're legal or not, but what do these laws mean for the exercise of your mandate? Well, I think, yes, we can discuss the legality of these decisions. Following the ruling of the International Court of Justice last year, saying that the occupation was illegal and that Israel has to put an end to the occupation, the issue of the legality is relevant, and a case has been brought forward in front of the ICC. Now, there's a law that prevents UNRWA from doing anything on Israel's sovereign territory, and Israel considers that Jerusalem is part of its sovereign territory. Jerusalem is part of its sovereign territory, where we have schools for about 1,000 children, and we also have a vocational training center and a certain number of health centers. And then there's a second law that prevents any contact between Israeli authorities and UNRWA representatives. And this law impacts our presence in the rest of the occupied territories. Now, as was said in the film, our co-workers are mainly Palestinian refugees. So we are part and parcel of the community. These people have a double identity. They're part and parcel of the community and working for the UN agency. And despite this law, our co-workers can continue to work in schools and in health centers in the West Bank, despite their no longer being any international presence ever since January 30th. The date from which all our visas expired. In Gaza, we've got 13,000 co-workers. The rest of the international community continues to depend strongly on our footprint and our network on the ground. And there again, these are mainly Palestinian co-workers who are there. And I've always been very clear about this. As an agency, we will continue to deliver our services up to the day we are prevented from doing so, in alignment with humanitarian principles, and until we are prevented physically from implementing our mandates. So all of this to say that we are still active in Gaza, in the West Bank, and in East Jerusalem.
How much do you feel, how threatened do you think the existence of UNRWA is threatened? Well, the existence of UNRWA is doubtlessly threatened. And I think the status quo of UNRWA that we've seen in the film will not survive for long. I think that in order to save the agency, we must register within a political framework. But in order to have a political framework, we must have a different reality. So the question is to know whether there is a political process ongoing. There are a few initiatives by Arab countries in order to try and give up, to create conditions for normalization in the future, and which requires for the Palestinian issue to be addressed. And it is only within that framework that UNRWA will continue to maintain its services, but also will be able to prepare the future Palestinian organizations that will be able to work to uphold our services. We always hear the question about whether we can be replaced or not, and we can be replaced, but we need to be replaced by a Palestinian institution. There is no other UN agency whose function is to deliver public services, and we've heard it in the field several times. We are a public service for one of the most vulnerable populations in the region, who are the Palestinian refugees. We are the Ministry of Education. We are the Ministry of Health. We are the Ministry for their fundamental rights that are usually delivered by states. So huge needs, unlimited needs, limited needs. How do you evaluate the attitude of states in your regard? I mean, so states are saying one thing. States say one thing and very often act differently. First of all, we have a very strong support within the General Assembly. We have a great majority of member states who regularly renew our mandate. We have a mandate as a public service provider, but we do not have the fiscal means of a public service, and therefore we entirely depend on voluntary contribution by the very same states who are asking us to have a universal basis for these elements that we have to do in Lebanon, in Syria, Jordan, West Bank, or Gaza. And with the Trump election, you are to lose 30% of your budget. We'd already lost it. We lost it a year ago. With the new administration, there will not be a return of this budget. We already had anticipated that the funds from the U.S. administration will be lost.
Suisse, vous connaissez les arcanes de la...
You're a specialist from Switzerland. You know how the Department of Foreign Affairs works. And on the 18th, we will be discussing in Parliament the issue of the financing of UNRWA by Switzerland. If it is a no, Switzerland will be the second country with the United States to withdraw its contribution, unless I'm mistaken. How do you understand the Swiss policy, which has drastically changed in the past few years? How do you explain it? Well, I think it simply shows the federal policies through the government and through the government. And I knew this would come. And even when I was an ambassador in Israel and I was writing reports on this matter, I thought I was writing information, but I was actually writing a very different film altogether. Not the film we just saw, obviously, but what were you writing? I was writing at the time that there are operations of Israeli influences in Switzerland. I was explaining how these were being organized, through whom they were being organized, and I said that first of all it was about suppressing UNRWA, first of all to forbid Hezbollah, and to create a great terrible discourse around Hamas, and we've seen it in the conference and that was to take place last Friday. It's all it takes is a phone call from the Foreign Affairs, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Israel to our Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and then we simply obey Israel and its requests. So there is the discussion in Parliament. It is not lost. There will be a vote at the State Council on March 18th. The commissions are extremely divided, as 6 against this, and will be the UDC president who has weighed in favor of the renewal, against the renewal of the 10 million of funds for UNRWA. But we are trying to do our best with France. Tomorrow we'll hold a press conference in Bern. And there will also be Israeli voices, Jewish Israeli voices will be heard in favor of the renewal of the support of Switzerland to UNRWA. So it is important to hear and to know that in Israel there are voices who say that what you are doing, Philippe, you and UNRWA, that it is absolutely extraordinary. And one of our arguments that is this humanitarian tradition is the tradition of international Geneva that you are destroying by refusing to continue the financing. And I also tell all members of the Council of States that who are hesitate, and I said, ask yourselves whether your children or your grandchildren will, when they'll ask you someday, Dad, did you participate? Were you an accomplice to a genocide in Gaza by refusing support to UNRWA? These are legitimate questions. In fact, there were some internal reports from the Department of Foreign Affairs on this subject, and these are reports because the International Court of Justice has established that precisely due to the restrictions to humanitarian aid, there was a plausible risk of genocide in Gaza, and it is also very possible that in a generation there will be reports on this matter, just as there has been a report about the treatment of Yenish by Switzerland, which was defined as a crime against humanity. And today we could ask of people who were at the government at the time, and we could ask them, Dad, did you participate in committing a crime against humanity? And we feel that people who are at the State Council today, they will have to be aware of that. So it's a matter of conscience, and everyone's role here is to try to raise the awareness of our elected officials for them to realize what it would mean to withdraw the support.
On a parlé de l'absence de réaction, ou tout au moins...
We've spoken of the absence of reaction or the lack of reaction by states, by international community in regards to humanitarian rights and international law. Jean-Daniel Ruch, is it possible to list such violation? First, I would like to say that it is not true that there weren't any reactions. There were very few political reactions. But we know the Security Council has been dysfunctional for about 15 years, and it has changed a little, almost strangely so, with the different transgressive ruptures that were introduced by Donald Trump. Since a few weeks ago, there was a positive decision on Ukraine by the Security Council with the positive vote of the Russian Federation and the United States, but the abstention of the two European powers, which was quite strange. So could something similar happen about Israel? We don't know. But in the meantime, we have to recognize that the Security Council, even when it does take resolution, these resolutions remain just declarations. And these institutions, the institutions who do have a bit of strength that could somehow hurt the process, are the International Court of Justice in part, but who has been quite silent for over a year now, after saying that there was a plausible risk of genocide. They've called for compensatory measures, including the increase of the number of trucks allowed into Gaza, and this was not done. On the contrary, it was diminished. But the other institution, which I feel has a potential greater impact, which is the International Criminal Court. The role of the International Criminal Court is to judge the individual responsibility. I repeat, individual responsibility. We are not judging Israel. We are not judging Hamas. We are judging individuals who are responsible for crimes against humanity, war crimes, or crimes of genocide. There has been so far 5 people found guilty, and it took a lot of courage for Karim Khan and the 3 other judges of the Chamber of the International Criminal Court to express such a judgment. They are being pressured. They are threatened of sanctions by the United States, including financial sanctions, which can make life really hard. So 5 indictments were produced, including against Netanyahu and his former Minister of Defense, with 4 indictments for crimes against war crimes, to voluntarily starve civilians and to intentionally direct attacks against civilian population. 2 indictments for crimes against humanity. The difference is that crimes against humanity refer to systematic attacks against civilians, systematic and massive against civilians, wherein the 2 charges are murder and persecutions. And also, we must remember that the International Criminal Court has recognized a potential genocide, and the 2 most serious non-governmental organizations show that who are Human Rights Watch and Amnesty International. After an extremely thorough and detailed analysis of the facts, these 2 organizations have reached the conclusion that, yes, the crime of genocide is indeed perpetrated or has been perpetrated by Israel in Gaza. Beyond this, there are other allegations. There are about a dozen allegations. I will not mention all of them, but there are reports of sexual violence, particularly in Israeli prisons, deportation, destruction of private goods, attacks against hospitals, against religious structures, attacks against people who are providing humanitarian aid. There are about a dozen of such indictments. And there are also allegations of crimes against humanity, which would require precise inquiries. On the Hamas side, 3 people have been indicted. 2 have since died by the Israelis. So there is 1 whose survival is uncertain, Mohammed Daif. And he is indicted with 6 different charges for war crimes and 5 for crimes against humanity: murder, cruel treatment, torture, taking people hostage to affect the dignity of people, rape and other forms of sexual violence, crime against humanity, who are perpetrated in a more systematic way, murder, extermination, torture, rape, and other forms of sexual violence. This is the list. It sounds like almost like something drawn by Prévert if it wasn't as sad. Dr. Ashrawi.
For a lot of silence, perhaps. what is your perception of the attacks against the international law? Would you put them on the same level as the attack against UNRWA? Is attacking UNRWA attacking the international law and vice versa?
Yes, certainly. First, let me tell you that Philippe Lazzarini probably has the most difficult job in the world. But I believe that's true of several successive directors of UNRWA that I have met and known and who are working against tremendous odds, because this is not new. The attack against UNRWA started from the beginning and became very visible after '67 and became very visible with the rise of the Palestinian national movement or resistance, and as part of the eradication of the Palestinian history. I don't want to talk about narrative, the history and rights and culture. These are facts. So again, because UNRWA is a unique organization, it was established particularly by the international community to take care of one specific population, not a global population. And it had two mandates. I mean, to look after the refugees as a vulnerable population with two rights, the right of return and or compensation. So in many ways, this mandate remains until the refugee question is resolved. And UN Resolution 194 talks about the right of return, of course. And until then, it's UNRWA that is entrusted with the well-being and the welfare and development of the Palestinian refugees, and as such has been acting as a government, as Philippe said, for the refugees. And it's difficult because they're in different places, they're not all in one place. But given that, the smear campaigns, the attacks, the disinformation, the outright lies, the horrific lies that were used against UNRWA have come to a head, because UNRWA has become a victim of the Israeli conflict, a victim of the Israeli attack on the Palestinians, and on UNRWA as being perceived as part of the Palestinian reality. And it is a living witness of the story of the refugees, of the suffering of the refugees, of the ethnic cleansing of Palestine. As Ilan Pape said in the film, it is the displacement and replacement of a whole nation, and an attempt at the erasure of this nation completely. So long as there is an UNRWA, there is, in Israeli eyes, a perception that the Palestinian reality is there and that the international community is committed to it. So it is both. Three, you also have a total disdain for the multilateral system, for the UN, international community, by Israel. Not a single UN resolution was implemented by Israel, not one. And at the same time, it treats the UN as though, I mean, look, it's representative toward the Charter, the human rights and so on in the middle of the General Assembly. They feel that they have the right to malign and to blame the multilateral system and to use ready-made labels, like they use terrorism for us, they use anti-Semitism or whatever, or anti-Israel bias, in order to maintain their own impunity. So any organization, at any legal system, any resolution, whether you talk about international humanitarian law, that threatens, that questions Israel, is immediately attacked. Now, international humanitarian law, of which, of course, as you rightfully said, Switzerland is the depository of the Geneva Conventions, and therefore is responsible for ensuring also their implementation, and not convening the high contracting parties of the Fourth Geneva Conventions is also a statement. UNRWA represents a lot. And the attack on UNRWA is an attack on international humanitarian law, on the global legal system and global rule of law, as I said, on the judiciary, ICC and ICJ, as your very learned guests have said, and also an attempt at maintaining the impunity of the oppressor, of the aggressor, its preferential treatment, its entitlement, being given, rights above the law and so on, and to withhold protection from the victims. So given all that, you have to contextualize UNRWA to understand not only its significance, but the severity of the attack, of the assault on it collectively, historically, legally, and also individually. I don't forget that there were also slanderous attacks against individuals, heads of UNRWA, and we know them. I don't want to repeat that, but every means possible is used in order to not just marginalize, but deconstruct and destroy. It used to be dismantle, but now it is destroy UNRWA. The legal system and the humanitarian system and the human rights system, as well as the global, as well as the multilateral system, the UN and its institutions, are all under test now. And if they abandon UNRWA and if they allow Israel to destroy it, as it is doing, I think Philippe was being very optimistic, because I know how difficult it is for them to function. They consider Jerusalem and the rest of the occupied territories as being under sovereign control of Israel, which they are not. But Israel acts accordingly. It has closed down schools. It has withheld also the status of international workers and so on. And it's closed down in Jerusalem.
Dr. Ashrawi, I wanted to go back to the question, to Mr. Lazzarini, and to the question of the future of UNRWA that you just introduced.
Yeah.
Monsieur Lazzarini, vous dites, il y a deux possibilités.
Mr. Lazzarini, you say there are two possibilities for the future of UNRWA. What are they? Well, the two possibilities at this stage are either that UNRWA implodes, in which case this will create a vacuum and will sacrifice hundreds of thousands of children who are living in the rubble and who were deeply traumatized in the absence of a functioning country. They will not be able to go back to school. There's no alternative. And as I said a while ago, there's no other UN agency able to deliver education on this scale. And then the second possibility is to say that the status quo is not possible. We need to have a transitional phase. The end of the mandate is imposed in the context of a political process. But if there's no political process, then I don't really see how UNRWA, in the current situation, could continue maintaining its services. So it would create a vacuum in Gaza. It would undermine even further the Palestinian Authority in the West Bank, when it's actually already struggling to maintain the services it's delivering. And then it'll send shockwaves through neighboring countries who are all weak internally. These weaknesses are different from one country to the next, from Jordan to Egypt. So you're saying that UNRWA would become part and parcel of a future Palestinian state? Is that what you're saying? Well, we're talking about something that was temporary and that's enduring, and that's something that's unique with our agency. Our co-workers are not paid the same way as other UN civil servants. Their benchmark is the host country. In this particular case, it's the Palestinian Authority. Why? Well, because we want our co-workers, the day when there is a political solution, be compatible so that they may integrate the workforce of the future state. So we've seen this provisional solution that's lasted for 75 years, and it was based on this premise. Now, At this juncture, I've got two comments. When we talk about the agency that's part of the problem, it's as if you were blaming humanitarian assistance for prolonging the conflict. No, there's no political solution to the conflict. That's the problem. It's not because we deliver emergency humanitarian assistance. No, absolutely not. And then let there be no mistake, beyond UNRWA, it's the rest of the UN system that is being challenged. Any organization that does human rights advocacy is banned. Any international NGO that does human rights advocacy sees its visas refused. Other UN agencies who did human rights advocacy are no longer present in Ramallah or elsewhere. So they want to control the narrative entirely. And what happens at the Knesset, at the Israeli parliament, is that there's a series of laws that are under discussion that will restrict the space even further. So it's not just UNRWA. UNRWA, you can explain the way the documentary film explained through the Palestinian angle, but beyond UNRWA, the impact goes much further. And the impact affects any observer, any international organization, any entity that does human rights advocacy. In the face of this reality, if we want to be realistic, what could some countries do to stop this phenomenon? Well, during the past few months, I worked closely with the Global Alliance for the Two-State Solution. It's an initiative of the EU, Saudi Arabia, and the Arab League to try and revitalize the spirit of the Arab peace plan. But the idea is also to put on the table the future conditions of a normalization. As Ms. Ashrawi says, I'm an optimist at heart. If I weren't an optimist at heart, I would have stopped what I'm doing a long time ago. So we have to find a way. We hear too many people say there's no solution. We're too far away from a solution. It'll be impossible. Well, in that case, then let's step up the dismantlement of an agency such as mine. But we haven't yet reached this conclusion. It might be the case in the coming weeks or the coming months. We'll see. In November, there'll be the debate at the UNGA about the renewal of the mandate. Mr. Ruch, do you want to react? Well, what I think is that either there'll be ethnic cleansing one way or another, it depends whether we're talking short-term, mid-term, or long-term, or there'll be the creation of a sort of Indian reserves. That's what we see in the West Bank already. Now, if we want to find a way out of the impasse, there have to be three elements that align. First of all, Palestinian unity, Palestinian cohesion with a legitimate president. We haven't seen this for a long, long time. There has to be an Israeli prime minister who agrees to play the two-state solution game, seize colonization, seize settlements, and we haven't seen this since Ehud Olmert. And then, third thing, a U.S. president who is ready to invest, in finding a solution despite the Congress. Now, I'm not very optimistic with regard to the two elements, Palestinian cohesion and a prime minister willing to accept a two-state solution. I don't think we're there yet. But Trump is surprising. He likes to disrupt things. He likes to think differently. Now, obviously, his narrative is absolutely awful. Think about the Gazan Riviera. He says this, but look at what he's done. This ceasefire could have been signed in a few weeks following October 7th, 2023. The ceasefire plan was there in May 2024. President Biden or his administration was incapable of using the necessary political levers to influence the Israeli government so that it would accept the ceasefire, despite the fact that it had been accepted by the Hamas. And Trump, or rather his special envoy, goes to Israel on a Saturday morning at 10. It's Shabbat. He brought Netanyahu out of his home so that he would accept this ceasefire. And despite all the weaknesses, despite all of Trump's statements, you can picture him imagining all the buildings that will be built on the Gazan Riviera. And yet there's a ceasefire. There have been exchanges of prisoners against hostages. So it's there. It holds. We've never had such a situation under the Biden administration, which is the reason why I'm saying we may have surprises. Surprise may be coming with Trump, although we do still need the two other elements to align. And then the Arab plan, which is more of a Gaza rebuilding plan than a peace plan. It's there with all its details. It's credible and rather encouraging. Because if you look at this plan, Gaza could be rebuilt in 5 years, and the price is not that much to pay. Think of the price of weapons that were delivered in the Ukraine. It's 53 billion euros. So if you look at all these elements, there are reasons to be prudently optimistic.
Briefly, because time is running, between the naive optimism of Mr. Lazzarini and Mr. Ruch's trust in President Trump, where do you place yourself? What is your feeling?
No, I'm still feeling genuinely concerned and alarmed. Now, people talk about a solution or a two-state solution, but you all know that Netanyahu and his government, which is the most extreme far-right fascist government in the history of Israel, certainly do not want a Palestinian state. They do not want, and no government ever talked in Israel, ever talked about a Palestinian state or Palestinian self-determination or Palestinian sovereignty. This is something nobody accepted, even when we were in the midst of talks. And I know that the best, as you said, that they wanted was just enclaves and Palestinian population centers surrounded by Israeli settlements and so on, without any sovereign rights under Israeli sovereignty or control. So this type of ethnic cleansing and transformation of Palestine to become Greater Israel is not new. It has been taking place gradually, but below the radar. And because there's an absence of holding Israel accountable, of a price to be paid, because the Palestinians have been dehumanized and demonized without any rights, the world has become sort of dismissive, except for, of course, public opinion and the younger generation and the progressive movements and people who understand what it means to be victimized in the South and others. The Western governments have become totally, immune, desensitized to Palestinian rights and suffering. Otherwise, they would have acted differently. So from experience, I'm telling you, I'm seriously concerned. I started by saying the Palestinian people feel let down. They feel betrayed. They feel abandoned. And they have been. And they have been. I haven't seen people suffer so much. I mean, there are different kinds in Gaza and in the West Bank of aggression, of attacks, of deprivation, of starvation, of loss of land, loss of life, loss of homes. This is ongoing daily. You don't need to investigate in order to reach conclusions. So unless you have the political will to stop this immediately from continuing. You will not be able to rebuild. You will not even be able to talk about a political program of a two-state solution or a one-state solution or whatever. You have to stop what's going on now. You have to maintain the Palestinian people on their land, on the ground, because otherwise the transfer is taking place. You need to stop this trajectory that is taking place, and Israel is doing it deliberately, and people are seeing it. So without any instruments, without any enforcement, no resolution, whether UN Security Council or no resolution of the ICC or ICC, nothing can make any sense or make any difference unless there is the will of the greater parties, all of them, in order to take these resolutions and decisions seriously and to act, to implement them. Otherwise, they will continue to be manipulated by the veto system. The US has vetoed, I don't know, 50 some resolutions related to Palestine. They will continue to be manipulated by Israel's perceived an actual impunity and protection. And of course, the massive support and sale of or supply of weapons that it has, and preferential treatment. Until you understand that equality means people on both sides are equal, you cannot continue to look for solutions that Israel can block and that its allies will support.
Thank you.
I am concerned.
Thank
I know
you.
how difficult it is. I know the suffering exists, but we need to keep going. We won't give up. That is my optimism. The Palestinian people are staying, and we will never give up.
Thank you. Now, maintenant vraiment très brièvement parce qu'on va devoir ouvrir.
So very briefly, because we're now expecting your question, of course. At FIFDH, we do not like for the public to leave completely depressed. Do either of you have a suggestion as to how to act, what to do, how to answer to what is going on? What signals can we be sharing? I'm not sure whether we both come from the Jura Mountains, but we are both optimists. So let us, we always try to see what can be done. What I would like to say for people who would like to work towards the freedom of Gaza, there are many civil society organizations, whether Palestinian, international, local, who are committing, who are working. We get together, who try to invent a different future. We must support them. I would like to mention one which I feel is particularly important in Geneva, which is Bait of Hope, and who has already brought about 100 Palestinian activists and Israeli activists in Geneva on 3 occasions. The first time because there wasn't a federal, there were no federal funds. They went to Berlin because the German government is paying for such activities, and everyone can and should support them. So I'd like to encourage people to support these organizations. And then secondly, if you are Swiss and the position of the Swiss government is one that you do not like, I remind you that you have national advisors, some advisor. We have a Geneva government who has given 500,000 francs, who could perhaps give more. And then there are other cantonal governments who could give more. So we have the opportunity of having a power in proximity, at proximity, and that you can usually reach. So do not hesitate to speak, to pressure them, to encourage your allies, and to have a more active attitude. And also, lastly, another positive note. I spoke of the indictments. I do not believe in the resolution of the Security Council, but the indictments already have an impact. Netanyahu and Gallant, if they come to Switzerland, will be arrested. I'm not sure in France, because the France has an ambiguous position, the Germans also, but the Federal Office of Justice will, as said, that they have obligation, they will do so, not the Department of Foreign Affairs. And I would like to remind you in this context that on 2 occasions, Israeli officials who, when they came to Switzerland, had to shorten their stay because they were afraid that it would end up in front of the Confederation's prosecutor. This is Ehud Olmert and and Zipilin. And we must leave it, and we must rely on the Federation, and we must put pressure wherever we can. I do not have much to add. The only thing perhaps that I could add is that I spend a lot of time with parliamentarians in general, because governments are finding themselves under pressure by their parliaments, and most of the time they are under pressure because they do not have enough time to look for information. It is also a war of disinformation, a war of propaganda. And I think that in order to understand the complexity of the context and the complexity of what is at play, this requires to have a desire to want to listen. And I think that for this reason, each of us must and can, through civil society or directly through elected official, can and should play a role. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thanks to all the panelists. Thank you. I made a mistake. It is the city who gave 500,000 francs, not the canton. I apologize for this mistake. I think Zurich gave 800,000. So we have a few minutes for questions. Do some people in the room wish to ask a question? Does anyone in the room want to ask a question? The questions, please, do not express positions of personal opinions. Please only ask questions addressed to one of the panelists. In terms of what we can do, you were speaking of what we can do. What if all the room was to write during the weekend to our state councillor? Could this have an impact? If the room is representative of members of the State Council, then yes. I think there is actually a State Councillor who's here in the room. Maybe he could give us some advice as to whom you should write to.
Bon, je voulais pas prendre la parole.
I didn't want to speak. I wanted to leave room for the public. But it's true that this date of March 18th is absolutely essential. This evening, there are 21 state councillors out of 46 who are ready to reject the proposal of the Commission to immediately and definitively stop funding UNRWA. So we must, by Tuesday, have 3 additional people joining our ranks. It is extremely difficult. I would like to say that by chance you can count on the 2 Geneva elected officials to refuse this proposal, both Mr. Poja and myself, and therefore we will refuse this solution that is proposed by the UDC and the National Council. But on the contrary, if you have friends who are in Swiss-German cantons, who are in the central parts of Switzerland, it is to them that you must ask that they write to their elected officials, because this is where may find resistance and where there has been a massive disinformation financed by the State of Israel. Should there be a viewing of this film for politicians? Where is Nicolas? Screening of this film for parliamentarians, is that something that is foreseen? Can we show the film to parliamentarians? Well, yes, it should happen. There is a screening on Monday at the Rex Cinema in Bern at 12 midday, which is organized for this very reason, for the parliamentarians who are in session to go there. The Rex Cinema is close to the parliament, and the idea is for a large number of parliamentarians to go, for them to become aware of what is being shown in the film. And the people who are organizing the screening say that we shouldn't count on the fact that many parliamentarians will go, because they usually do not leave the parliament. They are very busy with their respective commissions, but we'll do what we can. But I wanted to bounce back when Carlo was saying that we must insist and do lobby work in Switzerland. That we were hoping that the film would be able to be viewed on SRF, since RTS is supporting it and producing it, but they've chosen not to screen it. And this proves the political Röstigraben, which is also a mediatic Röstigraben, so this border between French-speaking Switzerland and German-speaking Switzerland. And so we must support this by any means necessary. One more question. My name is Thierry Vermont. A question to Mr. Ruch. Where we mentioned the conference of the high parties that was cancelled in Geneva, you said that it was all it took was the phone call from the Israeli ministers to Mr. Cassis. But I have a question which I thought was interesting. But I don't think I have seen comments on this in the media. But this project of a common declaration, where the Ministry of Foreign Affairs where the Ministry of Foreign Affairs has spoken a lot about the people disagreeing on this. But I did ask the Department of Foreign Affairs, and I asked them if I could have a copy of this common declaration, since it had been addressed to the 196 member states, and that it shouldn't be confidential. And this is the answer I received. Dear sir, we can only tell you that the signatory has communicated the project to the member states, and this since it hasn't received the support of a regional mass and a contracting party, therefore was not adopted, and the signatory therefore cannot make any comments about its content. I feel that this document is fundamental if we want to understand what the discussion is about, even more so since it has appeared that the Arab group had an issue in regards to a hypothetical reference to the issue of prisoners. But if we organize a conference of high parties contracting parties in Geneva in regards to occupied territories, I feel that the question of prisoners is fundamental. So if that is the issue that is at stake, I feel that citizens are entitled to know what was negotiated by the Confederation, what the attitude of the various political groups was in this regard within our country. Well, I do not represent the Confederation. Thank God I no longer work for the Confederation. There may be reasons to that. But what I wanted to say is that I was shown the text. I wasn't given a photocopy, but Mr. Sommaruga, I'm sure, has seen it. Mr. Sommaruga, do you have it? But what was very clear is that in regards to other texts that had already been approved, either in a conference of the sort or within the context of the UN, this context was way lesser. So from the point of view of the Islamic Conference or Palestinians, it would have mean a regression, a dilution, a diminution of the decrease of the existing obligation, and therefore they couldn't possibly approve a text that was lesser than existing obligation. This is the reason why they said that if you present this text, we cannot come. And then they said, well, there isn't a consensus, let's cancel. But there were two texts. So at some point, there was another text which had quite a bit more life to it, but they chose to present the text that was more to the liking of Israelis and Americans. Well, thank you very much. Thanks, everyone. We will now stop here. The evening was, we've learned a lot during this evening. Mrs. Ashrawi in Ramallah, thank you so much.
We all wish things will turn out for the best. Merci à tous.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you.